Welcome to 28 Days Beyond, where we celebrate and reflect on our history, our heritage, our culture, and our own authentic voice. And I'm your host, Alexander Evans, with my co-host, Mari Johnson.
How you doing, man?
Good. We're going to dive into access and opportunity, even when we have the skills and the ability to do phenomenal things. Why do you think that exists?
What?
That we don't get a fair shake and access.
White supremacy.
That's right. Everything.
Nah, because well, we live in America, but I do think though that access and opportunity is conditional.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So we would have to ask ourselves, access to what, and how are we defining opportunities? Now, granted, if we're talking about sort of success in the traditional American dream model, well, we know there have historically been structural and governmental barriers that have basically marginalized us and left us out. But I do think that African ingenuity, right? Black people have always found ways to make something out of nothing. So I don't want to just paint it with a broad stroke and just say we're locked out and that's it and we're, you know what I mean? But it's really about how can we exercise some sort of innovation to create for ourselves the opportunities to access whatever it is that we want. You know what I'm saying? But what do you think about it though?
I think that, well, I believe, let me not say I think, I believe that in times past, we had ingenuity, right? We created things of the lack of necessity. Even when we had opportunity and access, as we said, we kept our side hustle, right? So we was entrepreneurial because there was a saying that just in case Charlie changed his mind, my baby still got to eat. Right. So I think what has happened is we have said, what's been promised to us this way, right? You go to the right school, get the right education. When you get this, you can get that. But then when the paradigm shift change and we don't look out to build our own communities and create those opportunities and have access to one another where we can collaborate and build together, then we become left out in the cold. Then we rely on others to dictate how we should eat as opposed to us controlling how we eat.
Certainly, man. But this goes back to, yo, don't you want nice things? Don't you want all that America says that it has to offer you?
I do, but with the mindset of that doesn't validate who I am, and I don't forget just in case the situation change, I'm not left out in the cold.
Of course, we know that the situation always changes. You make your way all the way to the top, and they say, well, actually, now, you know what I mean? Finding all kinds of clauses and loopholes and things like that. But, I mean, again, I really think that we do see, because Black History Month, right?
Yeah.
They want to talk about famous Black firsts.
Yeah.
I've always found a problem with that sort of emphasis, and that approach to Black history, because it doesn't really focus on the broader history, which is how Black communities and movements of people have effected social change that has changed the quality of their life, right? Their material circumstances have transformed because of the things that they've done. Right, like I said, creating opportunities for themselves and making sure that they have the means to access whatever those opportunities behold. But I mean, what do you think, man? What's the move? How are we gonna make it happen?
Well, the move is we have to create our own future. We have to once again collaborate, and we got to see the beauty in one another and do business with one another, and then encourage and support one another in accomplishing the goals that we want and build our communities first.
Well, lucky for us, we're joined today by Kyle Myers, who is the director and shareholder in Stone Ridge Investment Partners, and he's going to break this down when we come back.
Our country back! We want our country back!
Tea Party message to Washington that we're going to take our country back.
We're just plain American people who are mad. We want to take our country back.
I've got to run here, but just real quickly, I know I was at a town hall yesterday, and I really had to take some people to task. Very nice people, but they were using those buzzwords that I don't think people realize all the time, like real Americans or give me back my America was one of the songs, or take back America. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Well, when you stand up and you wax nostalgic and say things like, I want the country that the founders envisioned, when the country the founders envisioned was a formal system of white supremacy, excuse me if I find it a little hard to think that race is not perhaps playing a pretty big role.
After one of the CNN appearances, I got an email from a woman who was a Tea Party supporter who was upset with my characterization of the Tea Party movement. She said that their calls to take the country back had nothing to do with race, that they were simply calling for a return to an era of low taxes and small government. When I replied to her, I asked her to give me a year that epitomized in her mind this era of American history. Which year did she and the rest of the Tea Party want to return to? Her response was almost immediate and not very surprising. The year she chose? 1957.
Leave it to Beaver.
It's a year that many conservative white Americans hold dear, and not just because it's the year Leave It to Beaver premiered on television.
Traditional America as we knew it is gone. Ward, June, Wally, and the Beav, out of here.
For many conservatives, that was the golden age of American history, a time when everything was in its place before all the struggles for equality and justice came along in the 60s and messed everything up.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. And on the set with us, we have Kyle Myers. Welcome to the set.
Thank you for having me.
Kyle, you do a lot of things.
Sure.
Why don't you break it down?
Sure.
Some of the things that you do.
Sure. So, as noted in the intro, I am a director and shareholder at Stone Ridge Investment Partners, which is an institutional money management firm focused on managing assets for large public pension plans, endowments, foundation, union accounts as well. And then in my spare time, if I have any, I am also the president of the Philadelphia chapter for the National Association of Securities Professionals. And what the organization does is it focuses on advocacy for diversity and inclusion in the investment management business.
That's a big fight.
Very big fight. Well, you know, the investment space or professional services space is kind of that last bastion of access that women, minorities have faced struggles with getting access to. So, you know, we like to say that when it comes to government contracting, many people will allow you to have a janitorial service contract or allow you to have a food services contract. But in terms of professional services, generally you've been excluded from the opportunity. And mind you, the mindset has changed. There are many states, many cities that have adopted policies and regulations to ensure diversity and inclusion, and even those goals are somewhat tough to meet. So our job at NASP is to advocate on behalf of our constituency to help bring business to fruition.
So let's take that, right? You've mentioned this statement before. Access and opportunity trumps skills and excellence.
Sure.
What's that mean to you?
Sure. You know, to me, you know, we all heard the saying, you know, go to school, high school, get good grades, go to a good college and finish well, go get some, you know, next level degree and allow that to, you know, be the cell beneath your wings.
Right.
And unfortunately, what we found is that, you know, the more you do that, without having the right connections, without having access to those decision makers that make decisions in terms of the corporate hiring ladder, or whether it's the business world and making decisions to provide opportunities for individuals to grow their business, whether it's the janitorial service, as I mentioned earlier, or the investment service or professional services as well. And so to me, what that means is, you know, we have to create ways for ourselves to be in the room, to give people the opportunity to have a culturally competent experience with us, to understand that we are capable of delivering and we're more than just whatever the current stereotype of the day is.
Well, let me ask you this, because you got a breadth of knowledge, extensive experience. How did you break into this field? That's the tough nut to crack.
Sure. I would say that when dealing in the investment services management, investment services field, the first and critical element is to be able to drive business. You know, one of the things that many people have a difficult time saying no to is the person that can bring more money to them. And so that if you can get into a position to create some wealth for somebody else, it certainly allows you the opportunity to create some wealth for you. And so for me, that was it. I got involved at a very entry-level, sales-level position after having played some college basketball and some professional basketball. I was fortunate enough to, you know, enter into the investment world by, you know, going in on the sales side and learning the business that way.
But you know, when we say this, you know, the necessity of access and opportunity, it makes a mockery of this idea of a meritocracy, right? The best person for the. How then we know there are other factors that are at play. Right?
Sure.
So what are some of those factors that go beyond just the numbers, or you know what I'm saying, the sort of quantitative data?
Sure, certainly. Again, I mean, I'll give you a very quick story. A gentleman reached out to me a couple of months ago who had lost his job and was looking for an opportunity in a very highly skilled space in the investment management industry. Very highly skilled space, the hedge fund world. And I'd asked him, well, how often have you been to any conferences? Does anyone know you outside of me? And he had no experience. He had gone nowhere. He just thought, you know, I'll go and do my job. I'll do a great job at it. And then I'll go home at 5 o'clock and rest with my family, because that's what my peers in the office do. They're able to go and have fun with their families and enjoy themselves. But, you know, so I did the same thing. So, you know, this is a gentleman looking for a job at about $220,000 a year. And what I shared with him is that, you know, you're not going to be able to put in enough resumes in order to make that happen. You've got to get outside of your circle. You got to spend some time out and about, introducing yourself, meeting people who can make the connection or help you make the connection that you really want to have, that can help you advance yourself in this space. And so he was able to do that. He went to a couple of events that not only myself but some of the group from NASP recommended that he do, and you know, he was fortunate enough to land actually a better job than I thought he would get.
Wow. That's what's up.
Wow. So
can you help a brother?
I deal with so and I believe that's why you created that organization, or one of the founders of it, to do that.
Sure. So I'll go even deaper. The organization was one of the original founders was Mayor Maynard Jackson out of Atlanta.
Okay.
And if you remember Mayor Jackson, you know that if you wanted to do business with the city of Atlanta, and you were a majority-owned organization, 20% of your business had better be done with minority vendors, or you weren't getting a contract.
Was he responsible for the airport?
He was. And so, you know, Mayor Maynard Jackson and a number of other individuals like himself in Illinois and in New York all got together and founded this organization with the idea of creating the access to opportunity.
We're going to take a quick break, Kyle, and we'll be right back with more when we dig a little bit deeper.
Right before dawn, as many as 10,000 whites descended upon Black Tulsa.
Opening fire?
Opening fire. There was a block-by-block battle throughout the black community. They would force the occupants of a house out. If people resisted, they were murdered on the spot. The homes were looted, and then they were set fire to.
Did the white authorities do anything to try to prevent this or control it?
They don't. They spend most of their time arresting blacks and disarming blacks, preventing them from defending their homes and businesses, taking them to these internment centers around town.
Sounds like a precursor of ethnic cleansing.
Absolutely.
Kenny Booker's father hid his wife and 5 children in the attic just before armed whites came to the front door.
We could hear him from the attic talking to him, said, "Nigga, do you have a gun?" I think he said no. And he said, "Don't set my house on fire, please." He didn't tell him why, but after he left, not long after he left, they set it on fire, and we had to scramble down in a hurry. And this sister, that's 6 years old, she said, "Is the world on fire, Kenny?" I said, "I don't know, but we in trouble, deep trouble."
The trouble came from the air, too. Investigators say some of the fires you see in this rare footage of the riot were caused by whites dropping explosives from World War I vintage planes flying over Greenwood. The flames destroyed almost every home and business in Greenwood, 35 square blocks in all.
We're back with 28 Days in Vagina. We're going to dig a little deeper with Kyle Myers. Kyle, what are some of the ways that people empower themselves, and what comes to mind, black people empower themselves to be self-sufficient in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Can you give people a backdrop on?
Sure, man. Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know, the Black Wall Street, Little Africa. You know, Tulsa, Oklahoma, as you may recall from the history books that we learned ourselves, over 600.
What school you went to?
Over 600 black-owned businesses, banks, hospitals, educational institutions. There were 13 churches in just that little town. And, the area was known as Black Wall Street around the country to other minorities who were in the South who were looking for ways to kind of escape the poverty that they were in. And so people flooded to Tulsa, Oklahoma in hopes of a prosperous lifestyle and having access to opportunities, because in Tulsa there appeared to be access to opportunities. But I think when you do a deeper examination of Tulsa, you understand that the overwhelming majority of those businesses were service businesses, businesses that really serviced the community that they were within. So even the banks were community banks, the churches were community churches. There were still those lines of do business here. There were, I think, 3 or 4 restaurants in that area that were pretty well known. And it was almost as if the concept of Black Wall Street was birthed out of a need and necessity to not keep money within the community, but to not be ostracized or injured within the broader sense of the community. And so, I'm not 100% sure that, there was the innovative thought of, hey, let's band together, as much as it was the thought of, hey, these guys don't want to take our money. We should just do business with each other.
But hearing you say that, it makes me think of the original Airbnb, the Green Book, right, which was for motorists who would travel throughout the South and didn't necessarily, you weren't allowed to stay in hotels, but with this book, they would tell you where to go to get food, where to get gas, where to so on and so forth. But of course, we know the result of Tulsa and this sort of economic, they bombed it. The government bombed you. So with that, what does that say about, what lessons do we learn basically moving forward?
Well, I think even if you, not to get too political, but even if you look at the anger that was expressed during this presidential election, I think you begin to see that when those who have had access and opportunity begin to see less of it, it can cause, it has a consequence to it, right? And so, Black Wall Street suffered. Not simply because they were making money and the government did not want them to make money, but people were angry. They were angry that the dollars from the community were not making it out into their community. And then beyond that, that was kind of, that was more like the, hey, I'm looking for a reason to be angry. Right, exactly. That's a good reason to be angry. And so, obviously hatred, racial hatred was more the protagonist there than, African Americans being successful and having great wealth. But when you have, the poor guy who is looking for his American dream and he can't find, and this is what we saw in this election, he can't find it. He's struggling to find a job. He used to have a business that is out of business now, and he can't find the meaning of life for him. And he looks over across the bridge and he sees, African Americans living what he thinks is the American dream. It can cause some consternation. I think that, played a big part in the demise of Black Wall Street.
So what about, a little bit before the election, we saw over the summer a lot of unrest around the police killings of, Black people. And there was a lot of talk about economic activism, boycotts and things like that. What do you think the long-term effectiveness of something like that is?
Depends on how long you sustain it. Surely, desegregation was also a function of the civil rights movement and the outflow and the big moves that we saw in terms of, Martin Luther King's work, Malcolm X's work. When people stopped taking their dollars and getting on SEPTA or the transit, some folks said, "Oh, wait a minute,
hold on,
we need to talk about this. And what is it that they're asking for, and is that really too much to give?" And so, that activism has a place, it has a power, But the power is only as long as it's sustained. The power is only only lasts as long as there's organization and structure to it. And so, some of the athletes of today who have shown or demonstrated their own version of activism, more recently, some of the football Super Bowl champions will not attend the White House meeting. And, I think that sends a message stronger than maybe some of what we've seen from others who have said that they were going to perform or they were going to have this meeting.
Interesting.
And that there were really no tangible outcomes from the meeting that you could discern, except for if you believe in top Chicago gang thugs.
That's interesting that you say that. A couple things is going through my mind. Why do we? So do you think that we're going to coalesce because of we've been struggling for a long time. I mean, just collectively, not individually, but do you think that we're going to kind of get together and create another Wall Street, Black Wall Street?
I don't know if the same incentives that were there in the Tulsa days are there today. We live in a globalized world, and I think cultural competency is probably our biggest advocacy. And the more that we try to do this as opposed to this, I think we're going to struggle with the creation of a Black Wall Street. Remember, it was more out of necessity.
Okay.
And so today the necessity is not there, but what should be there is the insight and thought behind supporting each other. I think today, it's said that the dollar in the Black community lasts about 2 or 3 hours, but back then it went actually generations. It went from one group to the next group to the next group. Other cultures don't have that problem or challenge, I should say, but ours do. And there's a lot of other factors to that. You take even in the investment industry, where a contemporary of mine with the same credentials, same background, he can wear khakis, he can wear, a button down, no tie, no anything, and I have to spend in order to be seen as credible. And so, they used to have a label for that. I dare not say it on TV.
Kyle, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with our final thoughts.
The survivors lived in tents and shacks which they built themselves.
My brother was 14 at the time, and he helped my father install wood. It was raining, as I can remember, it rain. Seemed like it was rain, and we had wooden floor in our tent. We were lucky to have that.
But Tulsa's whites gave them something, promises.
Now, in fact, after the riot, the city's white establishment said it was going to rebuild Greenwood. What happened?
They lied. Not a dime. They proceeded to pass a fire ordinance that said, in effect, that you cannot build on property that had been burned. They wanted to starve blacks out of the land. They made it known to all philanthropic groups, we don't want your money. We will take care of our own.
We're back with 28 Days, and we have some final thoughts. Kyle, what are some of the collective ways that we can put ourselves in a right mindset when it comes to our financial future and stability?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing that we need to consider and evaluate is how we think about wealth transformation or wealth transferring. Throughout our culture, we have very little to no insurance coverages, life insurance I'm talking about, and specifically. And for the most part, families leave legacies of, debt or, even if you're left some properties, because there's no insurance to cover the tax liabilities, you've got family members having to fire sale properties in order to raise money to pay the taxes, the tax burden. And so I think that, in this generation, I think what people have to deal with is that you yourself may not become wealthy.
Yeah.
But what you can do is transfer wealth to the next generation. And it will almost take this idea of giving up of me to pass on to the next generation when I'm gone. And I think that that's probably the first and foremost way to create wealth within the community. You know, we recently had someone pass in the family and barely had $75,000 worth of life insurance coverage. And this person was a medical director, grossly underinsured. She probably should have been more like $750,000. And so, you know, without having the baseline covered, insurance, life insurance, whether it's not accidental death, but you know, the income replacement if something happens to you. I forget the name of the insurance, but you know, those are some simple things. But then other things involve investing. You know, actually going ahead and open up an E-Trade account. It's not a plug for E-Trade, but you know, opening up the account and figuring out what you can do. Form small groups. You know, I'm a biblical man, so where two or three are gathered.
I'll be there in a minute.
That's right. So, you know, forming small investment clubs. You know, I've seen plenty of people do well and eventually move from investing in, you know, public companies through like an E-Trade to actually buying private equity, making private equity deals where they're actually buying manufacturing plants. Wow. And if you aren't familiar with PRWT, who's right here in the Philadelphia area, they bought a division of Merck, and it was the only minority-owned pharmaceutical manufacturing company that I'd ever heard of.
Wow. Kyle Myers, we want to thank you for joining us on 28 Days and Beyond, where we reflect and celebrate our history, our heritage, and our culture in our own authentic voice. Until next time, we say peace.